What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be taking a look at Star Wars Legion, how to play, and everything you need to know to get started. I'm not going to be going too in-depth with the rules, but I am going to be covering how to play a full game of Star Wars Legion. So let's dive right in. Star Wars Legion is a tabletop 1 versus 1 squad-based combat game that uses terrain and miniature-based combat. The miniatures are not painted, although the ones that you see here I have painted, but the ones that you get will not be painted, nor will they be assembled. So you will actually want to have some glue on hand at a minimum to be able to glue them down to their bases. If you want to see what they look like directly out of the box, I do have a core set unboxing, as well as unboxings for all the expansions released, which I will link down in the description below. The core set is going to come with Luke Skywalker, 2 full units of Rebel Troopers, and an AT-RT. And the Empire is going to have Darth Vader, a speeder bike unit, which consists of 2 speeder bikes, and 2 full units of Stormtroopers, which you see here. Now, like with most Fantasy Flight games, this is not enough to play a full, officially sanctioned tournament quality game, but this is enough to get you started on a smaller surface. Now, Legion plays on a 6x3 surface, so 6 feet long by 3 feet wide, although the standard practice game that you can play with the core set is only by 3x3. So you can play that one on a standard X-Wing mat, but that's just enough to learn the game, but not really to play a full game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume we have purchased a second core set, which is actually a really good value, and we'll do kind of like the practice setup for a full game, which will include another core set as well as an extra expansion for each of the factions. So now I'm ready to set up. We have 4 actual trooper units, 2 AT-RTs, and a snow speeder, which is available as a first heavy unit for the Rebels, as well as an extra 2 stormtroopers, an extra unit of speeder bikes, and the AT-ST, which is the first heavy unit for the Empire. Now, this is going past what you'll find in the core set, but I'm trying to teach you how to play a full game. But you know, like with most FFG games, you're going to want to buy a few extra expansions to get started if you want to play in sanctioned or official play. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at the cards that go to the units. Every unit in the game has a card that's associated with it. Now, what unit means is unit means a specific squad or individual unit. And in the case of Rebel Troopers, one of the things we're going to notice at the top is that there's a number 4 here, and that indicates that there are 4 units or 4 actual miniatures in this unit. And so we're going to set them right here. Now, it will also tell you in the instructions which one is considered the unit leader, because every unit is going to have a unit leader. And that's going to be the Rebel Trooper that has the cape for all Rebel Troopers. And that is basically used for the purposes of showing where the unit can shoot from, where the unit actually is. In the case of these guys, the rest of them kind of don't matter as much. The unit leader is the most important one, so you want to take care where you put them. The symbol above is going to, above the number 4 is that little triangle that indicates that they are a core unit. Core is important because the game is going to have certain restrictions on how many of a certain type of unit you can take. So in the case of core, you must have at least 3, but you cannot have more than 6 in a standard 800-point game. I say 800 points, so what am I talking about? Well, if we come over here, the number 40 on the top left is going to apply to the number of points that this unit is worth, and this is a 40-point unit, so that's how many of your 800 points they're going to consume. We're going to look in here, we're going to have any keywords that this unit has, and in the case of the Rebel Troopers, they have a keyword called Nimble, so if they spend a dodge token, they can gain another dodge token. We'll talk about that more when we get into combat. Over on the left-hand side, we're going to see all the available upgrades that they can take, and that, we're going to start off at the top. You're going to see a symbol, and that's going to correspond to other cards. So, and upgrades are going to have their own additional point costs. So, if in the case of these guys, if we wanted to take a heavy weapons guy, we could take this card here, which has the symbol that matches, and it says Rebel Troopers only, and this allows us to add a Z6 Trooper Mini, which is this one right here, which will also be included in the unit, and you can add him to that unit. Now that counts as, for one, it counts as an extra figure that can shoot. It also counts as an extra hit point, because the more figures a unit has, the more basic health they have. And speaking of adding extra health, we have a personnel upgrade below that, and we can add another Rebel Trooper.
It's going to cost us 10 more points. And we can just add an extra Rebel Trooper, there we go, an extra Rebel Trooper mini to the unit. So now we have 6. And you're going to notice that each of your units comes with 7 possible miniatures because there's different types of heavy weapons that you can add. So each unit can be configured different ways, but you're not going to get more than 6 troopers in a trooper unit. Additionally, we have equipment here, and we could maybe I'll give them targeting scopes. That'll add to that. And then we have a grenade slot on our Rebel Troopers as well, and we can give them impact grenades. Now, what else are we going to look at? Let's go over to the left side. We're going to see this little cube here, and this is the color of dice. There are different colors of dice in this game. Defensive dice are 6-sided dice, and there's going to be red and white versions of those. The red are better and the white are worse. So these guys, the symbol here indicates that they roll a white die for defense. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get to combat, but this basically is telling you that they have a lousy defense, which is, it's pretty bad. It's not the worst in the game, but it's pretty bad. Right next to it we have the green 1, and that is telling you how many hit points each miniature has. So if this unit were to take 1 wound, you would remove 1 miniature. And in the case of taking wounds, your leader has to take the wounds last if possible, so you will have to lose somebody else before your leader. Addition to that is their courage value, and this tells you how many suppression tokens they can take before they become suppressed. And that's important. We're going to talk about suppression more once we get into combat, but suppression is a very important part of this game. And what it means is that a unit is receiving incoming fire, so they kind of hit the deck, they get down, and they're, the tension of being in combat is starting to get to them. Now below we have 2 different spaces right here. We have a top and a bottom. Now the top is blank on them, but certain other units will have information on the top. For example, the ATRT has a surge symbol on the top. But in the case of the Rebels, they have a surge symbol for defense. And what that means is that if we roll their defense die and we were to get this surge symbol, we can convert that into an armor symbol. So they have instead of a 1 out of 6 chance on their defensive die, because there are 4 blanks on the white die, instead of a 1 out of 6 chance of getting a defensive hit, they actually have a 2 out of 6 chance. So it's slightly better because of that defensive surge. Likewise, a unit can also have offensive surge abilities to either hit or crit, and those increase their offensive capability as well. However, the Rebels do not have that. They're just Rebel Troopers, and they don't have that much training. Now, down at the bottom, we're going to talk into the type of weapons that they have. At the bottom here, we have the melee symbol, and this is unarmed. This represents if they move into base-to-base contact with another unit and they want to punch them and hit them and they're not shooting. And this tells you that when they're punching, they will roll a black die. Now, for offensive attacks, you have 3 colors of dice. You have white, which are the worst, black, which are the medium, and red, which are the best. So these Rebel Troopers have a moderately strong punch, but it's not the best in the world. Now, for their ranged attack, they have an A200 blaster rifle, which is indicated right down here. And this tells you this is the default weapon that the Rebel Troopers can shoot. And this tells you that it's range 1 through 3, and it will roll a black die. Now this is going to be applied to however many minis you have attacking. So if you have a full unit, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minis, in theory all 6 of them could roll that die. However, if you have some minis that have a special weapon like your Z6 Trooper here, your Z6 Trooper has a special gun that only he can use, and he might want to roll his 6 white dice as opposed to him just using the A200 for a single black die. So different minis will be able to use different things. Where we also have impact grenades, where some of the units could roll these if they wanted to. However, they are only range 1. Again, we'll talk more about weapons when it comes to combat, but this is the anatomy of a card. We also have different stuff for Luke Skywalker's card, for example. Luke Skywalker has a different type of upgrade slot over here called Force, and Luke Skywalker can take Force abilities. He might take something like Battle Meditation, which is when he issues orders, he can one of those can be to anybody on the battlefield. And he's also got Force Reflexes, which allows him to gain a dodge token. And this symbol here means that it's a free action, and this tap symbol here means that you have to exhaust the card in order to use it. And the cards like that will stay exhausted until you do a recover action to put them all back. So looking at Luke, we have a lot of the same stuff we saw before. The numbers are going to be a little higher on Luke, though. First off, the number up here means that he's a unit of 1. So Luke is all by himself, meaning that he is his own unit leader. We have the commander symbol up there, indicating that Luke is a commander. He is going to be giving orders to other troops on the battlefield. Every army that you build must have at least 1 commander, but you can have up to 2 commanders if you have a second commander. Of course, you could not use 2 copies of Luke Skywalker in that there is a little dot in front of his name. So if you had 2 core sets, you could not use both Luke Skywalkers. You do have his upgrades over here. He has a lot more keywords. He's also costs 160 points, so he is a more formidable hero. Now Luke has 6 health instead of just 1. So if Luke were to get a wound, you would actually take these wound tokens and put 1 on him, or in the case, you can also put it on his card if you prefer not to have tokens on the battlefield. Luke rolls a red defense die, which is better than a white die, so Luke's got a better defense, and Luke has the offensive surge ability to crit, which is very nice. Now, Luke has a ranged attack of 2 red dice, and he has a keyword here called Pierce 2, and we'll talk more about all those keywords when it comes to combat. But his powerful attack here, his more powerful attack is his lightsaber, which rolls 6 black dice and has some keywords on its own. Also, these cards are going to be double-sided. Usually when keywords appear on weapons, you can flip the card over and look at what their weapons actually do. So it's a nice little reference on the back side of your card in case you forget what some of those do. We also have similar cards for a T-47 Airspeeder. The Airspeeder is interesting in the fact that it has a pilot upgrade, so we can put Wedge on there. And it also has a hardpoint upgrade, which is an extra gun. In this case, we can put our harpoon to shoot out of the rear. And there's some interesting things on about the larger vehicles too, in that some of them have a fixed front or fixed rear arc. And that's going to apply to the base of the actual unit itself. If you'll notice, there are printed arcs on here, and that indicates a firing arc out of the front and potentially out of the rear on where they can and cannot shoot. But basically, these are heavy, and they have their own type as well. You can only have up to 2 heavies, but he is at 175 points, so you don't want to really put too many heavies in a unit because heavies are very expensive. And lastly, we'll take a look at our AT-RT card here, which has not too many new things, but we'll give it a hard point of the AT-RT laser cannon, and we'll also give it comms jammer because we're matching our upgrade symbols. Now, you do not have to put upgrades on your units. You can run them without their upgrades, but just for purposes of this, I've been putting a lot of upgrades on these guys. And the AT-RT, if you'll notice, the vehicles don't have a courage value. Vehicles have a symbol up here called resilience. And this orange number here basically will tell you how many wounds they can take before they can start to get damaged. And if an AT-RT takes more wounds than their resilience, then bad things are going to happen. And basically you'll roll a red die, and depending on what type of symbol, you are going to get some type of negative condition. Maybe you break down and you get 1 less action, maybe you can't really move as well anymore, or maybe one of your weapons blows up, which is really unfortunate. So, but yes, and we have our keywords there as well, and then we have 2 different types of weapons. You have your little guy on the front with his rifle that's riding, as well as the claws of the impact vehicle, or the grappling claws. So those are our Rebel units. The Empire has similar units as well, but one of the things I want to talk about next is what we do before we start playing a game. So the first thing we're going to do is build a command hand to go along with your army as well. And the command hand is going to have a lot to do with the commander that you have chosen, or commanders. Now you're going to have 7 cards in your command hand. And they're all going to have different pips on them, but the rules are simple. You have to have standing orders, which is a 4-pip card. The more pips, the worse it is. You're going to have standing orders, and then you have to have 2 3-pips, 2 2-pips, and 2 1-pips. So for the core set, you're going to basically have no option. You're going to use Luke Skywalker's 3 cards, because each commander has 3 cards that are specific to them, as indicated by the little symbol that's up here on the side in the corner. Darth Vader has similar ones You can only play those if Darth Vader is alive and is your commander that's issuing these commands. And these command cards, what they do is they allow you to give out orders to the units that you have on the battlefield. And that's important when it comes to activating them, because you'll need to have an order next to a unit if you want to activate them as a sure thing. Otherwise, you'll have a little bit of luck that you'll have to hope for. But also some of the specific ones are going to do nice special effects. You also have some generic command cards that can work with anybody, and they just simply activate 1 unit, 2 units, or 3 units respectively. You also have standing orders. Now, the reason that this one is so important is that it will go back to your hand each turn. Other cards that you play are removed from the game after you play them. So this is a 6-turn game, so you can't run out of cards because of the fact that standing orders always comes back to your hand, but you couldn't run out of cards anyway. But the important thing is that if you play ambush, your opponent now knows that you played one of your 1 pips, and the less pips that are on the card are going to give you either priority or basically the ability to go first. So you were going to basically choose one from our hand, play them in secret, and then our opponent will play them in secret, and then when we're both ready, we're going to reveal. Boom. So we'll compare. I played Ambush, which lets me activate 1 unit, and he played New Ways to Motivate Them, which is one of Vader's, which lets him activate 2 troopers and has a bonus effect. And the bonus effects are really nice for these cards, and they all do different things, and they all kind of cater to different playstyles or different situations. But because I had a 1 pip, I will be able to go first, which could give me the advantage, and it can be very tactical to be able to activate first. And so that's an important thing about these command hands. So we're going to build those, and then we're also then going to set up the battlefield. We're going to place obstacles, and you want to do this before you get into your pregame card draw, which is also very important. But if you don't have any terrain, you can set up barricades. There's going to be 8 barricades in the core set, which are useful for having troops hide behind, and they are going to give us cover. And I talk quite a bit about cover in a lot of my other videos, but I'll talk about it a little bit more once we set up the battlefield and do some, some terrain. I will set up a battlefield here shortly with using some of these barricades as well as using some terrain. But then you're going to, once the battlefield is set up, you're going to take a look at these cards that come with the game. And these are what's going to define how the game is played for each individual scenario. So you're going to have these 4 deployment cards and that come in the core set. There are more that are being worked on. You're going to also have 4 objective cards. These tell you how you win. And you're also going to have 4 condition cards, which help define the battlefield further. And what you're going to do is you're going to shuffle them and deal out 3 of each type. And we'll just go like that. And go like that. And what's going to happen is players will alternate, eliminating the leftmost card in any one category. And what's nice about this is it provides an interesting back and forth. And each of you get 2 opportunities to eliminate a card. So if, for example, I really don't like this one, and I had the lower point value of my army, so I said I'll be the blue player and I'll go first. I could eliminate this one, and now the red player, who's going to be player 2 in this case, has a choice to eliminate one, or maybe they'll pass, and they say, oh, well, I don't want hostile environment, and so they'll eliminate that one. And then it goes to me, and I say, oh, well, I also don't want disarray, and I want major offensive. Now this one's locked. And then the second player can then eliminate one more. Can't eliminate one that's all the way to the left side, or they can pass. And so let's say they pass. Now you're going to pick the leftmost card showing from each of the categories. So major offensive is the leftmost there. Recover the supplies is the leftmost here, and clear conditions is the leftmost here. And this is going to tell us how, first off, what happens on the battlefield. And this one, it has no effect, so it means it's a bright sunny day. Had it been something different, we might have, hostile environment. We can't remove suppression, or there's one that limits line of sight, which is limited visibility. They can do all kinds of interesting things to the battlefield and add extra variables or mutators. Recover the supplies. It tells you how you win. You can always win this game by completely destroying your opponent and killing all of their units, but that's very hard to do. And this game isn't so much a death match as it is a tactical scenario objective-based game. So your objectives are going to tell you how you win the game. A lot of times that's by using objective tokens. And then also you are going to have your deployment zones, which are going to have numbers on here, and they're going to show us where we deploy. Like a 3 here is going to mean range 3, so we're going to measure range 3 out here, and each segment is 6 inches long. So this basically means 18 inches there, then another 18 inches, and then 12 inches, and then another 18 inches, and then 6 inches in. And so we're going to mark those and mark that battlefield.
So as you can see at this point, I've gone ahead and set up the battlefield. Now we would do this before we drew cards, but I've used a mix of various different types of terrain. So I've got a downed AT-AT over here, and I've got some different pieces of terrain that I've made, and I have videos to talk about all of these. I've got some trees, I've got a crashed high interceptor, and over here I've got some 3D printed terrain. I have videos for that as well, and you can check all of this stuff out if you want to learn more about terrain. But to piece in different areas between these larger pieces of terrain, I am using the barricades that come with the core set as well, because you don't want too many wide open areas. You want to have a lot of different places for your troops to be able to move behind. But as we can see, we're going to take this, we have the 6x3 thing, we're going to take this, our major offensive deployment, and we're going to use these to mark them off. And now these are different tokens that you have that come in the core set, and they are used to help you have a visual reference of where you're going to mark everything off. So we're going to take our movement tool, and this movement tool will be able to go into each other, and each of these are 6 inches, and you're going to get 4 of these in a core set. And it helps to be able to use 3 at a time. So I'm going to take this and mark, we have right here, this is going to go from 3 forward up to here, and then we're going to go 3 out, and we'll mark that right here. And then we're going to go 2 down. 1, 2, about right there. And then we'll get 1 more and mark that right here. And basically we're just following the number, each number on the deployment card is how many of these bits we're going to use. So we went only 2 bits in difference between these two, and then 1 from here to there, 1 from there to there, and then 3 from here to here, and then 3 from here to here. And then we'll do the same thing for the other side. That's going to tell us our deployment area. And we'll do that for both sides. And we'll go back and forth. And the blue player is going to deploy first. And we're going to go one at a time. So the blue player will deploy one of their units. Then I will deploy one of mine if I'm the rebel player. And we'll go back and forth until one player is out. And then the other player will finish all of theirs. Once all of the units are deployed, then we can go ahead and start the game. Now, if you have an objective that has objective tokens, you're going to place the objective tokens before you deploy your fleet. So in this case, before you deploy your troops. So in this case, we would be using a couple of objective tokens, and these are going to look like, well, they have the little red symbol in the middle, and we'll deploy those, and we'll just say for purposes of this that we have some objective tokens, and they're these pieces of terrain, and we'll say that they're marked on the battlefield. So let's say the Imperial player is going to start by deploying a unit of stormtroopers. And they'll have to keep them completely within their deployment zone. They'll deploy the leader and then place everyone else in cohesion. And what cohesion means is they're going to be within a 1 speed move of the unit leader, and they all have to be within basically a radius about this big. So you have some flexibility, like you could potentially set them up in a line like so. You could set them up in like a formation, everybody behind the leader, or any which way you want, as long as it fits within a certain distance. And I'm going to explain that distance when we talk about the actions they can take. Then the rebel player will go ahead and deploy an AT-RT, like so, and then we'll just go back and forth deploying units. Drop a snow speeder over here, and so now we've deployed all of our units,
And as you can see, it's going to be a big fight for the middle, it looks like. Now, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to pick our command cards. I'm going to pick a card and play it face down, and the other player is going to pick a card and play it face down. And that's going to allow us to see who's going to be able to go first, or also how many units we're going to be able to issue orders to. You're going to have these command tokens. And the command tokens are all going to have your own faction's insignia on the back. And on the front side, it's going to have a symbol depicting what type of unit. So for core units, and don't forget, this is going to match the card, the symbol on the card. Core units have this little triangle, and we have different ones for different units. So every unit that you add is going to add one more token to your pile of tokens. This is the symbol for commander. This is the symbol for heavy. So our snow speeder is going to be this one. We're also going to have support units, which are going to look like that, and that's going to be our ATRTs. And we're going to have a bunch more core because we have 4 core. And we're going to shuffle these all into a pile. However, if I can issue orders, then I can take one of these and put it face up. So if I could put maybe a face up token next to Luke Skywalker, and I could put a face-up token maybe next to this core unit. And when those are there, instead of pulling from the pile to activate a unit, I can flip one of these over and activate a specific unit when I want to. So this kind of can give you control over who you activate. Otherwise, it will end up being a little bit random. If you've played other games like Star Wars Armada, you'll know that when it's your turn to activate, you can pick and choose any unit that is activated. However, that's one difference in this game, in that it may be a little bit random, and the ability to pick and choose is a luxury that you're kind of bidding for with these cards. So then we'll flip these cards over, and I will have played standing orders. Now this one's going to come back to my hand. This is actually a very popular first turn card. It only lets you to give an order to 1 unit, but it also comes back to your hand, and usually the first turn it's not quite so crucial. But in the case of the Imperial player went with Assault. They wanted to issue orders to 3 units. And he also, the Imperial player wants to maybe try and go before me, so they played Assault. Now, Assault will not go back to their hand, so Assault will be removed from the game, and they will no longer have access to that card anymore for this game. So, since the Imperial player goes first, the Imperial player can choose, and the Imperial player is going to say they want to issue one to Darth Vader himself, and they also want to issue one to the ATST, and they want to issue one to a support, which is going to be one of these supports. Now, and that's going to be that first speeder bike. Now, by process of elimination, that means that in their pile they have 4 core command tokens and 1 support. So the Imperial player has a pretty good amount of control at this point, because if he wants to activate a Stormtrooper, he can just pull from the pile, and then he's got a 4 out of 5 chance of pulling a core unit, and then he can just activate any Stormtrooper. So we'll set the pile to the side, and we'll let the Rebel player now, who goes second, determine which unit they want to activate, and the Rebel player will go ahead and say they want to activate Luke Skywalker, or at least issue a command, not activate, but issue a command to Luke Skywalker. There's a difference between issuing a command and activating. Issuing the command just means that you can activate them whenever you want, you can choose. So it's helpful if you want to go first. It's also it's helpful if you want to ensure that you go last. So maybe the ATST that's over there will want to go last, because they don't want they want to have my snow speeder maybe move and get in position so they can take a clean shot at it, which is definitely possible. So the Rebel player will go first, and I won't activate Luke Skywalker quite just yet. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll draw from the pile, and I'll draw a core. So what that means is I get to activate one of my core units, and what I will do is I'm going to go ahead and activate this unit right here. So now we're going to talk about actions. So when I get ready to activate this unit, I can do 2 actions, and I can do any 2 actions available to me, and with the exception of the move action, any other action can only be done once. So if I wanted to do an attack action, I could only do that 1 time during my activation. If I wanted to take some kind of token, I could only do that 1 time, so I couldn't do the same thing twice. But movement can be done twice, and there's various different types of movement. So the standard move, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the Rebel Trooper card, and I'm going to see how many red lines it has here, and it has 2, and that means its speed is 2. Now there are 3 different movement tools. We have a speed 1 tool, a speed 2 tool, and the speed 3 tool. Now each of these can turn up to 90 degrees, and they're slightly curved. So what I'll do is I'll take the corresponding tool, there's speed 2, and I'll go ahead and attach this to the base of the unit leader, and and I can swing it any way I want. And he can move around this barricade perhaps, or he can go over here. And I'm going to pick him up and put him at the end of it. Now he doesn't have to travel the full length of the tool. I could do a partial move and stop him anywhere along the way. And then once I complete that move, I'm going to pick up the rest of the unit and put them back in cohesion. I don't have to move every single unit. And what cohesion means is they're going to be within at least a distance 1 move of the leader. So for example, just to give you an idea of the range, if this guy was out there, he would be too far away. But if he was about that far, that would be about the limits of how far he could be. You generally want to keep your units pretty close. All right. So I could move him there, and I have another action. Now, if I wanted to, considering it's the first turn of the game, I could take another move and move him somewhere else. Or at this point, I could take maybe a defensive action called dodge. And a dodge would give me one of these tokens, and I would set that next to the unit on the ground. And that means if they were to be attacked, they could go ahead and use that dodge to cancel one of the hits that are coming in at them. So it's a defensive, almost like an evade, an X-Wing, or something like that for similar games. It's a defensive action, and all these tokens will go away at the end of the round. So it's only useful until the end of the round. Now, if I wanted an offensive action, I could take an aim action, and the aim action is going to put a similar kind of token right on them, on that unit, right now on the ground next to them. And when an aim is spent during an attack, it allows you to re-roll up to 2 dice of your choice during that attack. Now, it is important to know that if you somehow happen to get multiples of these tokens, you can spend more than one. So if I took an aim action and then somebody else were to have given me another aim token and I had 2 aim tokens, I could in theory spend them both to re-roll 4 dice if I wanted to. Or if I happen to have multiple dodge tokens, I could spend 2 dodge tokens to cancel 2 hits if they were incoming. Note that I cannot cancel critical attacks. And we'll talk more about that once we are done with actions. I will talk about combat. So we're going to, we could also take an attack action, which we'll talk about later. We could take a standby action, and only troopers can take standby actions. And standby will give you this token. Now, this token is actually very similar to the aim token, but slightly different. And a standby action you can only take if you haven't taken an attack action so far during your activation. So if you've moved or you've aimed, something like that, you may want to take a standby. And what standby does, it gives you the option to move or attack once somebody comes within your standby range, which is 2 sections of this. So if somebody gets close to you, you can shoot them. Or if you're guarding an objective, perhaps somebody is trying to come in and take it, and you can take a surprise shot at them as soon as they complete an action within your range. So it's a nice way to guard around corners, or nice way to hold a position. Now, the other things that you can do if you're not a trooper, there's different things that vehicles can do. So let me move these guys back, and I'm going to talk about the actions that maybe if we were to activate this ATRT. Now the ATRT is going to handle movement a little bit differently. If you see, it has a notched base. So the ATRT and vehicles with a notched base are going to have to take their movement, and the ATRT is also speed 2, and they're going to have to stick it in here. And now they can only kind of move straight, so their movement is not as free form. You can't just go sideways with them. So their movement works a little bit differently. But now one of the things you can also do is you can pivot, which is considered a type of move. Although it's not a standard move, it does fall under the umbrella of the move action. Whereas a standard move is just moving, straight or forward. With this, they have a pivot, which they can turn up to 90 degrees in one direction. And if you're going to do this, what I will generally do is mark one of the lines here and make sure that I don't exceed that. And this is useful because with many vehicles, they have a frontal arc only, so they can only shoot out of the front, or sometimes they'll only shoot out of the rear or other sides. So it's important that make sure that you're facing enemies. Another thing you can do is you can do a backwards maneuver, and you can go backwards. Now, the backwards maneuver can only be done with the speed 1, and it can be also useful to reposition where your front arc is going. Only ground vehicles can do a backwards maneuver, though. If you are a hover or flying vehicle, you cannot do that. Now, if he was a faster vehicle, if he had a top speed of 3, he would actually be able to do a backwards maneuver of 2, because you're only reducing your speed by 1 when you go backwards to a minimum of 1. But in the case of most of the ground vehicles that are in the game right now, they all have, the fastest ground vehicle right now is only a speed 2, so that's why you would do a 1 speed if you went backwards. Now, our snow speeder is going to behave slightly differently. Our snow speeder's got an interesting ability on its card called Speeder 2. And Speeder 2 gives us 2 different things. It allows us to ignore terrain that is height 2 or lower. And height 2 is basically determined by 2 of these range segments. So that's pretty tall. That's like a foot tall terrain. So it can fly directly over, many buildings. And also when I activate, I must perform a compulsory move. Now, a compulsory move is an interesting thing, and there's a couple of units in the game that have it. The speeder bikes have it as well. So what a compulsory move is when you're going to use your top speed, and as soon as you activate, before you do any actions, you have to go ahead and perform a forward move. And you're going to, or I should say a move. And you have to complete this move. If you can't complete the move, you're going to go as far as you can, and then you're going to suffer damage equal to your max speed. So we'll say they went there, and now they get to take their moves. Now, you can still take 2 more moves, so the snow speeder can move very fast. But that it can also be dangerous, because if you're lined up for a perfect shot, let's say I end my turn, and then I end right in front of Darth Vader, well, the next turn I'm going to have to move before I can shoot, so I might fly right past him and potentially forfeit the option to shoot him if I can't get turned around well enough. So a compulsory move is important there. It is also worth noting that with a vehicle, if you do a compulsory move, that puts you to land on top of your troops, they're going to be displaced. And that could be enemy troops as well. You can't overwrite other vehicles, but you can overwrite troops, and that will push them out of the way. The defending player or whoever owns them gets to choose where they go. And you are going to also give them a suppression token for being kind of blown out of the way. Now, it's only on compulsory moves that a flying vehicle will do that. But it's important to note, because you don't want to, or repulsor vehicle rather, it's important to note that because you can end up knocking your own troops out of the way and giving your troops suppression. And suppression is kind of bad. We're going to talk about suppression when we talk about combat. So now let's say we have these 2 units. I have a unit of rebel troopers going up against a unit of stormtroopers, and the rebel troopers decide they want to fire on the stormtroopers. So they're going to take an attack action as one of their 2 actions. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to see if they can actually hit them. So one of the things we have to do is we have to check range. And we know that the rebel troopers have a range of 1 to 3. And so we're going to measure from our unit leader, and we can see that these troopers are at range 2. Now, if only one of them was in range, the whole unit would still be in range. So that's one of the reasons you kind of don't want to put your troops farther forward than your unit leader, because you have to measure from your unit leader. But if you can hit just one, then you can hit them all, at least as far as range is concerned. So once that we determine that they're in range, we also want to check line of sight to the unit. And we can do this a number of ways. If it's a regular trooper, we can just draw a line on the ground. But if it's a really tall unit, we want to kind of check from the tallest center part of the mini. So we look kind of from the head down and see if they are obstructed from view by anything. So for example, if this was in the way, if this TIE fighter was in the way, then maybe we couldn't even see them. So just because they're in range, if we can't see them, we can't take a shot. But in this case, these guys are out in the open. And then we also need to see if there's cover. If they were behind perhaps a barricade, they might have heavy cover. And there's different types of cover in this game. There's no cover, which this currently applies to these stormtroopers. There's light cover, and then there's heavy cover. So I would go ahead and attack them, and I have 4 minis that can shoot them. If by chance one of my minis was behind a wall and couldn't see them, then that mini would not be able to contribute dice to this attack, since he can't actually see them. So you're going to look at their rifle, and in the case of the rebel troopers, they have a single black die for their weapon, the weapon that I'm choosing to use, which is their ranged attack. So each mini in the attacking unit would contribute 1 die to this attack. So in the case of a full rebel trooper unit, or the default full rebel trooper unit, we would roll 4 black dice. So I would go ahead and roll those, and then we would look at the different, wow, this is actually a pretty good roll. So in this case we have a critical, 2 hits, and a surge. Now for surge we can check and see if there was anything. Now during our roll dice we're also going to do anything that we have to do during the roll dice step, which would be convert surges. So I do not have the surge to hit ability. Stormtroopers however do. So Stormtroopers have a little more training, so they do have the ability to convert their surges into hits, but I do not. So this one will count as a blank. So this is gonna count as 3 hits. Now criticals are going to be important when it comes to applying dodge and cover, but for the purposes of this attack, this critical is going to be treated as a normal hit. So that means that there's 3 damage coming into those Stormtroopers. Now we're going to take a Stormtrooper and we're going to go ahead and look at their card. Now the Stormtroopers have a red defense die. And they have the offensive surge will become a hit, but they don't have a defensive surge. So what they will do is they will take their red defense die for each damage that's incoming to them. So in this case 3, so they'll grab 3 red defense dice, and they'll roll those 3. And now we got 2 armor symbols, which will each cancel a hit, and then we got a blank. And the armor symbol can cancel a hit or crit. I mean, it's damage. They're going to cancel one of the damages. So 1 damage is going to get through. Now, considering that the Stormtroopers have 1 health per mini, they're going to lose a mini. So 1 will come off and will come off the board. Now, after that has happened, there's one more thing that's going to happen, is that if after the attack, if at least 1 result was a hit or crit, that unit's going to get a suppression token. And that means that they were attacked and they're ducking for cover. They're getting down, like diving into the dirt or the snow or whatever your terrain is, to try to avoid incoming fire. So what does that suppression mean? So let's talk about suppression. So suppression tokens are meant to indicate that your unit has taken incoming ranged attack. So anytime you're attacked with a ranged attack and there's at least 1 hit or crit showing, the unit is going to receive a suppression token at the end of that attack. Suppression is going to mean a couple of different things. For one, any unit that has at least 1 suppression token is raising their cover by 1 value. So these Stormtroopers that have 1 suppression token that are out in the open, instead of having no cover, they're now going to have light cover. And what that cover means is that cover will cancel a single hit during the applied dodge and cover step. So if you had a dodge token or if you have cover, you can cancel hits with your cover. However, you cannot cancel critical hits, and that's what makes them important. The other thing that suppression will do is during the beginning of your activation step, you're going to perform a rally in an attempt to remove suppression. Now, every unit technically has a rally step at the very beginning of their activation, whether or not they have cover. It generally only matters, though, if you're trying to resolve cover. There's only a few corner cases where it actually matters, even if you don't provide cover, or have suppression. So one of the things you're going to do is you're going to rally. So these guys, let's say we're going to activate these rebel troopers and they have 2 suppression on them. First thing we're going to do is we're going to attempt to rally. Now we're going to roll 2 white dice, 1 for each token. On every symbol that has ink that comes up, we will remove 1 suppression token. So in this case, I would roll 2 white dice and I got 2 blanks, so I do not remove any of my 2 suppression tokens. So now that we have suppression token, we know that suppression tokens the first thing is elevate our cover. However, they're behind that barricade, so they already have heavy cover, and you can't go higher than heavy cover, so it's not really doing them much good right now. But we also have a courage value. Now, if we have suppression tokens equal to our courage value, or more, then it's considered that we are suppressed. Now, suppressed means that after we rally, if we're still suppressed, we are going to perform 1 fewer action during our turn. Now that's kind of a bummer because a lot of these units like to move and shoot, or aim and shoot, or be able to do multiple things. And if you're just going to be able to take only 1 action, that's kind of a bummer. But the third thing that suppression can do is if we have double our courage value after our rally step, we are going to enter what's called panic mode, and we're going to get this token here. Now these units are going to panic. And what that means is instead of they're only taking 1 action, the only thing they can do is move at their maximum speed to the closest board edge, which in this case, from the unit leader, would take them all the way to here. and then I would move them into cohesion. They're trying to run away, basically. They're panicked, they're running away. And if that takes them off the battlefield, then the unit is gone. Then they have fled the battlefield, and they are destroyed, and you pick them up and take them away. So it's very, very dangerous to have units panic. Fortunately, we have ways of cheering them up. If your unit is within range 3, when I have, 3 is pretty far distance, of its commander, which in the case of Luke Skywalker, they can check against Luke Skywalker's courage when it comes time to panic. So Luke Skywalker has a courage of 3, which to double his value, it would take 6 tokens in order to panic. So basically, if Luke Skywalker is close enough to these troopers, they're not going to panic. Now, so even if my rebel troopers were to get a 3rd suppression token, granted, they're still going to lose their action, but they're not going to panic as long as Luke Skywalker is within range 3 of them after their rally step. If Luke Skywalker were to die, and then I had to activate these guys, then they would panic if they did not successfully rally. Now, if they had 6 tokens, then they're still going to do it. And whatever your different commanders have different values. There's some commanders that have lower values than 3. You also have a special case when it comes to Darth Vader. So here we've got some stormtroopers that have 7 suppression on them at the end of the round. So next turn is going to be kind of scary, but Darth Vader is nearby, and if you'll notice, Darth Vader has a blank line there under his courage. And that basically means he has no courage value, and he's a special case. Now, since he has no courage value, he cannot be assigned a suppression token. The same thing goes for vehicles. Since vehicles technically have no courage value, vehicles do not get a suppression token when they are attacked. But when Darth Vader is attacked, he won't get a suppression token, but that also means his double value is still null. In other words, his stormtroopers and his units that are near him will never panic, because they know that there are worse things than dying. And one of those is failing Lord Vader. So they're far more afraid of Darth Vader than they are of the rebels. So as long as Vader remains within range 1 through 3 of your stormtroopers, they will never panic. And that is a useful thing. Now the game is played over 6 rounds, and you keep track of this on this round counter. And at the end of the round, one of the things you're going to do is remove a single suppression from every unit that's on the battlefield. So in the case of these stormtroopers, if they had 3, we would pick one up. And then here we would pick one up. And now they're down to 1. And these guys only have 1. We can pick one up off of them as well. And it's nice when a unit clears all of its suppression, because of the fact that now it looks like it will be able to do 2 actions without having to try to rally. Some other things related to combat, I want to talk about a couple of keywords. I'm not going to cover every possible keyword here, but I am going to talk about a couple of interesting ones. First one, the ATRT and certain vehicles have a keyword called armor, and it'll tell you on the card, when defending, cancel all hit results. So armor is a really nice keyword. So if somebody is able to attack you and they roll hit crit, for example, then you're automatically going to cancel both of the hit results, and only the critical results you will have to then defend against. And you can even stop those with your normal defense dice. So it's very nice. It's hard to take damage if you have armor. The ATST and the ATRT here both have armor. Now, the ATRT also, on one of its weapons, it has a keyword here called impact. Impact 1. And impact, what it does, it's one of these values that stacks. Now, any keyword that has a number after it in this game will stack. So if you were given, impact 2 and you already had impact 1, that would add up to impact 3. But for key purposes of impact 1, while attacking a unit that has armor, change up to one hit result to a critical result. And if your value is impact 2, it would be 2 hit results to critical results, etc. So in this case, if I were to attack him and I rolled a hit, after the apply, dodge, and cover step, it was taken care of. Any hits that remain before they get canceled by armor, I could then take one and turn one into a crit. And that is important for a couple of reasons. Now, I'm going to take the Snowspeeder here as an example. The Snowspeeder actually has cover 1, and that's meant basically it's harder to hit because it's flying. But now but it also has armor. And the reason for such a thing is because if it were being attacked by the ATST, it could potentially roll something like like this, you know, maybe it rolls 2 blanks and a hit. And let's say the ATST also has impact, and he's planning on turning this hit into a crit before you have an apply dodge and cover step, which is going to cancel that one hit before impact has a chance to take place. So there is some timing there, and now that's a little bit more advanced, but you know, it's important to know about impact and also about armor. And the last keyword I want to talk about is Pierce. That certain weapons will have. Darth Vader, for example, has Pierce 3. And Pierce is an interesting keyword. It says, while attacking, cancel up to 3 armor results. So when you're attacking somebody, and if Vader attacks you and rolls 4 hits, and you were to roll some dice and you ended up with maybe 1 armor symbol to cancel 1 of those, well, his Pierce is going to kick in and cancel up to 3 of your armor symbols, and you have a pretty good chance of taking full damage when Darth Vader attacks you. Or anybody who has Pierce, it really helps their damage get through. The last thing as far as combat that I want to talk about is the ability to split fire. So, like I showed you before, my basic Rebel Trooper has 1 weapon. Now I've decided with at least one of my Rebel Trooper units to add the Z6 Trooper. And this particular Trooper has his own weapon that's available to him, in which case he could either choose to use the whole unit's weapon or his own. And also I've given them impact grenades, which is another weapon that's available to the whole unit. So we have 3 different weapons available, and as long as we have 3 different troops, we can potentially split our fire when we declare an attack action. So what that means is, first thing I'm going to do, if I want to split my fire, why would I want to do that? Well, impact grenades have range 1, and they have impact. And now impact is on the weapon, so that means it was going to be multiplied for each. Everything on this card is going to be multiplied for how many units. So if all 6 guys did it, they would roll 6 black dice, and it would have impact 6. So it would be very, very strong at being able to do damage to maybe an armored unit. But let's say that this guy has only got 2 health left, and maybe I don't need to attack him with everything. And maybe I'll want to take my 2 actions for this unit, and I want to have them take an aim token, and then I'll want to have them split their fire. Maybe I want some to shoot at these stormtroopers. I want the Z6 Trooper all by himself to shoot at Darth Vader, and then I want everybody else. Maybe I'll have 3 guys shoot there. I'll have 2 guys throw their impact grenades at this guy, and I'll have Vader take his shot. And so the key with splitting your fire is each, you can't have the same weapon go into 2 different pools. So I can't have, for example, I can't have my regular blaster rifle going to 2 different targets. So everybody who's using this blaster rifle all has to be shooting at the same target. Everybody who's using impact grenades have to be shooting at the same target. And anybody who's using this, which is just this guy, has to be shooting at the same target. So I could split my fire up to 3 ways, but I don't have to do it 3 ways. I could just say, you know what, I want the Z6 Trooper and 2, so maybe the Z6 Trooper and these 2, to shoot at this guy, so impact grenades and Z6, and then everybody else with the default weapon at the stormtroopers. But we can split it up to those 3 different ways. So let's say I want the Z6 on Vader, and I want 2 guys with impact, and then I want 3 regular guys there. So impact would roll 2 black, and we rolled 1 hit and 1 blank. Now I could spend my aim token for this attack, or I could save my aim token for another one. But in this case, let's say I spent it here, I would re-roll that one, and then we're going to have impact 1, or I'm sorry, impact 2, because we had 2 guys roll it. So that would be two crits, which might be able to get 2 damage through to this ATST after he rolls, because he only rolls white defense dice, so maybe we could finish him off. Then I would take my Z6 Trooper and attack Vader, and he's got a lot of dice, so I'm going to gather a big handful of white dice. But I don't have my aim token anymore, so we were to roll these all towards Vader, and white dice have a lot of blank sides on them. And we don't have an offensive surge, so this surge goes away. So that would be a hit and a crit towards Vader, and Vader would roll and try to defend against that. And then my last 3 guys would roll 3 black dice against these guys with their default weapon, and that would be 2 hits against them. Now the important thing about splitting fire is sometimes it's useful even if you can't kill those units, because it does count as giving a suppression to every unit that you attack. In this case, the vehicle wouldn't take a suppression, And Vader wouldn't take a suppression because he has no courage value. But if you had 3 different stormtrooper units, you might want to split up your fire to give out extra suppression, even if you don't think you'll be able to kill them. Because it's nice to slow them down. Because even if they're not at risk of running away, they may still lose an action. And stormtroopers do have the precise keyword, which if they are able to take 2 actions, they can aim and shoot you. And aim is better for them because they get to re-roll an additional die when they take an aim. So suppressing other people is really nice to do. So since I've been talking about Vader a little bit, I figured we would break down the inevitable Vader versus Luke duel because I wanted to take a look at some of their abilities as well. So first off, you'll notice that we were also talking about actions lately, and Luke has equipped with this card called Force Reflexes that have this symbol here, and this symbol is called a free action. And what happens is this won't count towards one of your 2 actions. So if Luke is taking his activation, he could potentially move, do this, and then move again to get a free dodge token. However, because it has this exhaust symbol on here, it's going to turn sideways, stay exhausted until you do a recover action. And that's another action we didn't talk about yet, because recover is an important action. For one, it lets you to ready all of your exhausted cards, but it will also remove all suppression from you. And if you have a lot of suppression, recover might be very, very useful, especially in the case of Luke Skywalker, who is likely a very likely target for those stormtroopers out there, and everybody's going to want to take a shot on Luke. Vader has Force Choke, which is, and there's different ways you can outfit them, but this one also has a free action, and it lets you choose an enemy trooper mini at range 1 that is not a commander, and it can suffer a wound. So Vader wouldn't be able to Force Choke Luke Skywalker, but he would be able to pick a mini out of a Rebel Trooper unit, and that's awfully nice, especially when they have something like the Z6 Trooper or an upgraded mini in their unit. You can just, snipe that one kind of out of the unit, especially since they can usually choose who takes wounds, and they're going to keep those expensive minis to last. Now, Vader also has Master of the Force. During the end phase, you may ready one of your Force upgrade cards. So Vader is very nice in that aspect, in that he can use these and not have to worry about doing a recover action, since he doesn't take suppression anyway. I'm hoping that if they ever do another version of Luke, that he will have the same thing, because Master of the Force is a really nice ability. And Vader also has Saber Throw, and this one, as an action, it has the action symbol on here. This one doesn't actually have to exhaust. You may choose one of your melee weapons, perform a ranged attack with that weapon against an enemy at range 1 to 2, using half of that weapon's dice rounded up. This is treated as an attack action, and that combos very well with his ability called Relentless. Now, Vader is slow. He's only got speed of 1, so he can move really slow, but after he moves, he gets a free attack, and since one of his attacks are a free attack action, you can use Saber Throw, so he can basically move and then throw his lightsaber to help make up for his slow speed. Whereas on the other side, Luke has Charge, where after he performs a move action, he may perform a free melee attack action. So if Luke is close enough, he can move to you, engage, and attack. Let's talk about engagement. If Luke were to move into base contact with his stormtrooper unit, they're now going to become engaged in a melee. So then you'll just make sure that everybody's touching bases. You're going to move these troopers to touch with Luke, and they're now in a melee. That means a couple of different things. First off, it means that nobody in there can be shot. So my guys can't shoot at the stormtroopers because Luke is there. And it means their guys can't shoot at Luke because their stormtroopers are there. Even though you would like to think that the stormtroopers or Vader wouldn't care and say, I don't care, open fire anyway. That's not how the rules of the game work, at least at this time. Now, that also means that we can now use our melee weapons. So Luke can use his lightsaber, which is very, very strong. It also means that the stormtroopers can use their melee weapon, which is they can punch. And if you notice, their stormtroopers, they can punch a little bit harder than their weapons, because they roll black dice, which are a little bit more effective than the white dice from their weapons. So stormtroopers would actually rather punch because they have like an armored fist, I suppose. But that also means that the unit can't move unless they do a withdraw. And if they were going to withdraw, then it consumes their whole turn, their whole activation. So if these guys don't want to be in this melee with Luke when it's their turn, they can't just move away. They can do a speed 1 maneuver to withdraw away from the combat, but then that consumes their whole turn basically. So they don't, withdrawing is a big deal. So sometimes it's better to just stay and hopefully that you can finish them off, because if they were able to attack him and kill him, then they could move as normal. So engaging in a melee can actually be a useful way to make sure that you don't die, especially if Luke is trying to take on the whole Empire by himself. As long as he's engaged with a melee with somebody, it's going to be hard for them to hit him. Now, the thing is, being engaged with a melee doesn't stop other people from joining into your melee. So if Vader were to come up in here, he could join in as well, and then he could attack Luke as well. As long as there's enough room for you to put him in, then he can do that. If another Stormtrooper unit came up and wanted to do it, they could do that, and they'd have to get as close as they can. But then nobody else is going to be able to get in there into that melee. Now, vehicles are going to work a little bit differently. You can still get into a melee with a vehicle, but since it's not a trooper and a trooper, you're not going to be engaged. Well, actually, that's a bad example because I wouldn't get into a melee with my own unit. But if I was going to go here, I would be against the ATST. Luke could walk up there and slice at that thing, but that is not going to count as an engagement. And what that means is that my units can still shoot at the ATST, and the Stormtroopers can still shoot at Luke, and this also doesn't stop us from moving, but I will be in melee attack range. The only exception to that kind of practice is the Snowspeeder, which is actually immune to melee, according to its card here. If you look, it's immune to two things, blast and melee. And that just means that it's flying so high, if somebody were to get into base contact with it, they would not be able to use their melee weapon. I want to talk about a couple other types of movement as well. Since elevation is such an important part of this game, there's different ways that you can move beyond just moving around the battlefield or reverse movements and pivots for vehicles. Another type of movement is called a climb. So if I have a rebel trooper unit right here and they want to climb up this building, well, one of the things they can do is they can use two actions to do a climb. And now to do that, the commander has to be in base contact, and he has to go straight up, and then you can place the unit in cohesion on the top. And now that unit is on top of the building. And that could be a great place to get high. Maybe you can shoot over barricades, and somebody else won't get cover that way. So it's really nice to get on top of buildings. And you can only climb up to distance 1 that way, so only about 6 inches in height. And you want to go basically as close as you can to the point that you started. Not all pieces of terrain are going to be completely flat like this one, but in a case of an awkward piece, you're going to talk about the terrain with your opponent before the game starts and kind of decide on the ground rules for what's climbable and what's not. Like here's a piece that you might say, well, this one isn't really climbable because there is no flat pieces on top. But one of the things you could do is you could do a difficult move over it. Now, any piece of terrain that's not taller than the mini, you can say this is difficult terrain. So like barricades, for example, your guys can move over barricades, but you're treating that as difficult terrain. So what does that mean? Difficult terrain, you're going to reduce your speed by 1 to cross it. So in the case of a barricade, instead of being able to use a normal speed 2 over, you can, which would be great, you only do a speed 1 move over it, which is still okay because otherwise you would have had to go around, and then you might have been over here. So that's a difficult move. And you can also use difficult moves to cover other types of terrain, like this other wing right here. Like maybe here you would want to cross over that part without going around. Or maybe getting up into an elevated tree position, you would want to say that you would decide that this is going to be difficult terrain. Or maybe you would decide for gameplay purposes that it's not, and you can just move up into it easily. So you can decide those things with your friends or whoever you're playing with beforehand. But generally, if it's taller than the mini, then it's going to be then they're not going to be able to treat it as difficult terrain. Then they're going to have to climb. Now we talked about climbing here. Now there's another type of climb that you can do. It's called a clamber. It's a type of move, and it's called a clamber. And a clamber is a quick climb. And to clamber up, you're going to do it with just one action up to distance 1 instead of taking both of your actions. But then after you do that, you're going to roll white dice for every unit, a white defense die for every unit every miniature in the unit, and for every armor symbol, you're going to take a wound. So in this case, we got pretty lucky, and we would take no wounds for that. And then sometimes there's going to be specific actions that are unique to a mission. So in the case of this objective here, recover the supplies, all the trooper units are going to gain the action to claim, and claiming an object is if your leader is in base contact with it, you can claim it, flip it over, and now you're in control of that objective. And whoever has the most of those at the end of the game here is going to win. And that's how you use victory points for those, and that's what that's for. Those are victory points to count that. Some of the objectives will give you a victory point earlier in the game, and some of them it's just counted throughout the whole game. What's important to note is that if you are carrying an objective token, if you ever panic, you're going to drop that objective token and it'll flip back over. Or if you die, you drop it and it flips back over. And so it's not one of those things where you can just claim it and then you take it and you have that, and you've instantly got it. You know, you have to claim it and hold it. So objective tokens that you have to claim are pretty interesting in that way, because even if somebody gets off to an early lead, you can always come back towards the end and defeat them. Now, one of the things when we were talking about suppression, we also mentioned resilience on vehicles. And so I want to talk a little bit more about what this means. So at the top here where you see that ATRT has 6 health and then it has resilience of 4. And what that means is as long as it's got less than 4 wounds, it's fine. But once it takes damage such that it would have 4 or more wounds, you're going to roll a red die. And depending on what this red die rolls, you're going to get a different type of negative condition. And so, for example, if we roll it and we get an armor symbol, then it's going to become damaged. And we're going to use this gear symbol here to demonstrate that. And if it becomes damaged, what that means is that at the start of its activation, we're going to roll a white dice. And if we get, if we get a blank, then that means we're going to get 1 fewer action. So that's pretty bad. That's a way to stop us from getting actions. We could also get, if we roll a blank on the red die, we'll get disabled. And then that's this token here. And then that means that it has to spend 2 actions to perform a standard move. And it can also no longer do reverse. And if we roll the surge, then it's going to get, which is probably one of the worst ones, is weapons destroyed. And the opponent gets to pick one of your weapons, and that gets destroyed. And that one is pretty bad because usually there's one weapon that's the best. And so depending on what he's outfitted with or what he's equipped with, then you're probably going to pick whatever his hard point is, and then they can no longer use that weapon. Now you can't get 2 of the same one, so you can't get weapons destroyed twice. But by that point, you're almost, usually by the time you've already taken a wound to get you one of these, you're almost dead already. So it's pretty rare that you'll have more than one of these. However, there is some other things that can happen to vehicles. There are certain units have the ion keyword, which will give you an ion token. And a vehicle that has an ion token, after it activates, however many ion tokens it has, it's going to do 1 less action for each ion token it has. Then you're going to discard all of the ion tokens. So if a vehicle has 1 ion token, it goes to activate, and it's only going to get 1 action, generally. Or if it has more than 1, then it's going to basically lose all of its actions, and then you're going to get rid of all of its ion tokens.
Alright guys, so I think that's about all of the basics. You are going to play 6 rounds of this, and at the end of the game, your particular objective is going to talk about whoever was the winner. So, there's a lot of versatility that comes to this game, and there's no one video that can answer all of your questions. So if you have any more questions, be sure to let me know. Also, be sure to check out Crabbok.com for all the latest guides and strategies and rules reference guides, links, and all of my other articles and videos that kind of go into more detail on different aspects of the game, such as terrain, suppression, movement, and all of those things. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new here to the channel, I do giveaways an awful lot, and one of the best ways to enter those is to become a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my other videos. It's as simple as that. So you want to make sure you also click that bell for alerts so you don't miss out whenever new content comes out. I usually will be updating all the latest and greatest games, especially all of your favorite Star Wars games, whether they be Fantasy Flight or other science fiction games, as well as Star Wars content in general, such as movie reviews, TV show news, and whenever new stuff comes out of Lucasfilm, because there's a lot of great stuff, as well as certain other board games as well that I will generally tend to cover from time to time. So if you're new here, make sure you get subscribed for all the latest and greatest. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and just don't forget to click that bell for alerts. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.